Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Patricia Love. Patricia is a woman's empowerment coach and practitioner of neurolinguistic programming and emotional freedom technique. Patricia is the author of the soon-to-be-published book, Seen and Unheard, A Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. Now, in the book, Seen and Unheard, Patricia courageously shares how she was able to navigate a life of mental abandonment, abuse, and trauma, and ultimately to find her power and worth within in order to create a new story. Patricia shares her deepest secrets, pitfalls, and triumphs along the way in hopes of inspiring her readers to choose themselves and realize that they too can have it all. Patricia, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Well, thank you, Howard. It's such a pleasure to be here. I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Fantastic. Now, for our listeners, the name Patricia Love may be familiar to you. We had Patricia as our guest for the first time back in 2020. And I know at the time, Patricia was working on her book. I think at that point, we might not even have had a title, but lo and behold, Seen and Unheard is about to be published. So first of all, congratulations to you.
Thank you. And thanks for bringing me back. This is exciting. And it's exciting to write the book. It was a lot of release and relief, you might say.
I can't speak to this personally, but if I had to equate publishing a book, it would be as painful as birthing a baby.
Well, I have to say it was quite emotional. I did not expect writing a book to be so emotional, to be honest. I mean, this had been in my mind for the last 10 to 15 years to get this out, to get this put out there, because I wanted to help other women and people to realize that they can too change their lives. No matter how you were brought up or whatever happened, you can change your life. But I didn't realize that reliving it through words would break me down in so many ways. And it released even more of my negativity that I held on to, because we always hold on to it. So it was a really healing process, you might say.
Cathartic, so to speak.
Exactly.
Now, I want to get into the book because there's a lot here. I think, and I would love to understand, and our listeners would like to understand, who are the ideal readers for the book. But before we do that, I think it's important if you could share a little bit about your background, kind of like the 30,000 foot view, and being a former flight attendant, 30,000 foot view, it's like perfect timing.
That's good. I love that, Howard.
That's good. I did not plan that, but I thought, okay, let's say that. That works.
Good. It works for me. Well, I actually grew up in a middle class home in Bellevue, Washington, where actually they consider that now the Rodeo Drive of the Northwest, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? I grew up in kind of a place that my father, he was in sales. My mother worked for him. And the biggest thing is that growing up, my dad was a very unemotionally unavailable to me. He had his own story, which is probably another book, okay? His own story in his life that made him that he just did not know how to show emotion or be loving and caring to a child. And I was the youngest of three. So I was pretty much growing up by myself because there was such a big span between my brother and sister and I. Okay. And so I really grew up as an only child in so many ways. And I was lonely because my mother was an alcoholic. And my dad was just never around. So I was given a beautiful roof over my head and food to eat, but never inspired or motivated to do anything, be anything, or become anything. And overall, it was just be seen and not heard. Yeah.
It's a question that I have, and for our listeners, I have the privilege of understanding a little bit about Patricia's backstory via the book and doing the research prior to this podcast. And a couple of things that really dawned on me as the statement you just made about your dad. And, because I look back at my own father and even in some ways my own mother, I love them. They're both deceased. And, as the son, the youngest, I love them. But I also think that statement, your dad didn't know how to love a child, how to be that kind of a father. And I could, when I read about that, when I hear you say that, it brings back memories, because I think we instinctively go out, get married, have kids, and it's almost as though nobody's taught us how to become parents.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is, because that was my father's past story and your parents' past story. And then unfortunately, if we don't acknowledge this, and when you're young and when you're a child, and I talk about the inner little girl within us, especially a little girl or a little boy within us, we only live what we learn, especially as a small child. So we don't know, except what we see maybe friends and other people doing, hugging their kids and giving them a hug or giving them a kiss on the head or whatever. But you really don't know that that's different. So you don't know any better. So you just make do with what you have until you grow up, and you have to you get into real life and behaviors change, and you wonder why you can't hold on to relationships, and you wonder why you can make money and then you lose money. So there's so much involved in that. And yet, if we think about our parents, they only learned what they knew.
Right.
So at the time, so I know a lot of people grow up and they're like, they hate their parents and stuff. But in reality, we have to learn to forgive them, because they know not what they do. They did the best they could. And in my book, I even talk about that, because my dad showed his love in different ways. He showed his love through buying things for me. And so what happens? I internally learn to buy things for other people, thinking that that's going to buy me love with men and the such. So it becomes this hamster wheel, you might say, that if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results. And I speak about in the book that I wanted to be exactly like my father, because I idolized him.
Right.
And guess what? I became just like him. So,
who wrote the song "Cats in the Cradle"? Oh, it'll come back to me in a minute.
You can bring it up later.
But it's essentially that story. We grow up idolizing our parents, and then when potentially our parents need us, then there's that realization, oh my God, my child has become just like me.
Exactly. And what is interesting is that until you break that behavior or acknowledge it, you first have to acknowledge it before you can do anything. You can't break habits unless you acknowledge what that habit is, or a bad habit is. So, and most people do not take the time to figure out why they keep doing the same thing, or why they're having broken relationships, or why they can't seem to get to the next level in their career, or all different kinds of things, until you actually stop and think, now, why am I doing that? And really be truthful and honest with yourself. And this is what was so difficult, is that's not easy to be truthful with yourself. It's hard to be honest with your own self, because we think that, like, oh, wait a minute, there's nothing wrong with me.
You've had a quite a variety on the career front. I mean, you were a flight attendant for a short while. You sold, I think it was insulation, which sounded like a cool opportunity. I mean, you never know. Now you're a very successful real estate professional. Maybe there were some other interim careers in between. But what I'm curious then is, we carry this, for the sake of a better word, baggage with us. And we either don't know enough to open it up and see what's in it and explore. But at some point, you reached a threshold of, I need to start to look and see what this baggage is.
Because the bag is cracked and blew up and the zippers broke. And because I kept compartmentalizing everything and throwing, and I had to get almost new bags because they got so big that they exploded. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. Unfortunately, it can happen and not in good ways. They can actually sometimes take their lives, because they get so down on themselves and they just can't figure out what's going on. And because everything is blowing up in their face. And the lucky thing for a lot of people is sometimes they have little crises and they can manipulate and move through them. But some of us and a lot of people, and they don't always want to talk about it, they just say, oh, I was taught to be strong. I'm just going to stuff that in there and not worry about those feelings. I'm going to stick those feelings in there. Same way when, as we spoke to, when I had some trauma in my life with rapes, and then my sister's dying, lots of little traumas that add up, but you're taught you can tough it out. You can be strong, put on that face, put on that lipstick, put on that mask you wear and go out and just do it. And too many people do it. And then they do not take the time to find out who they are, because then they wonder why they're all stressed out. And it's hard to survive.
Or they look back on their life and it's like they wonder, what if? Why am I alone? Why am I
absolutely
struggling?
You say all that to yourself. What's wrong with me?
Right.
Why can't I be like that person? Why can't I have money? Why can't I? Why do I keep getting divorced? Why can't I keep a relationship? Why? There's all kinds of things in everybody's story, and everybody has a story.
We all do.
And it's just a matter of acknowledging that story within, because we have that power to change that story. It's whether we choose to or not, or we're willing to take the time, because like I mentioned, writing the book, it's almost traumatizing to write and understand who you are, because it's scary, because we don't always like what we find.
Mm.
And when we find them, we can't fix anything until we really acknowledge it, even if it's bad.
Sure. And so you mentioned a few minutes ago, the baggage was starting to break. I mean, the zippers were breaking. They're coming apart at the seams.
Yeah.
When that started to happen, was it a aha moment, or was it gradual? But then what was that shift that, okay, I need to figure this out because I can't continue to go down the same path?
The same road. Well, it was one particular day in September. I remember it quite well, because it was, for me, everything came to a head. My mother had passed. About a week and a half later, my husband at the time had his own story, and he left the building basically, and had to take care of his mother, who died within 6 months. And then he just never kind of came back. And then everything kind of went from there. And I was lying about those things. And then the real estate industry started to take a dive. And so the money was not coming in, but I had learned to spend money just the same. So the bills were still coming in, and the credit cards were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was just all piling up on top of me. And what really was the worst thing was when my husband's girlfriend started sending me pictures, and I just couldn't take it any longer. That was kind of my breaking point.
Your husband's girlfriend?
Yes, was sending me pictures of them together. And,
right.
Even though I had known about it in my mind, I, again, did not want to acknowledge it out of sight, out of mind. Right. And well, then I had to acknowledge it. I was lying about where he was. My friends, in reality, everybody knows. But in my own heart, I was just holding all this in. And I got to a point, and I was drinking too much, to be honest. I was drinking too much. When you drink too much, other things happen. And one day I was drinking martinis, laying on the floor, drunk. I had an extra martini. It wasn't quite drunk, but I was getting there.
Wow.
And I actually had an epiphany, whereas literally there was a fire of energy when I was laying on it, because I wanted to give up. I truly just wanted to give up. And this energy just came through me. But I first felt this paw on my hand, or this soft thing on my hand. I turned, and there was my cat looking at me with her paw on my hand. And I swear, she says to me, this cat was talking to me, even though her mouth wasn't moving. She says, "Don't give up. I love you. I need you. Take your power back." And then all of a sudden, that energy that was kind of rotating around me just went through my whole body. And it just was, I was amazed. And then all of a sudden, these 5 words popped into my head. And I had to go write these 5 words down. And these 5 words were acknowledgement, forgiveness, mindset, accountability, and perseverance. At that particular time, I had no idea why I wrote those down. But I wrote them down and knew that I had to start then, and not 3 weeks from then, then because I needed to change my life. And I still believe to this day, because I've had so many crazy things, that might be another book, happened to me in my life, that it was my sister coming through my cat because she was always a jokester. And I believe that she was coming through letting me know because I believe that she's been attached to me because she mentored me. She cared about me. We were very, very close. So I believe that she saved my life. And I talk about my cat saving my life. So it's true. It's how it happened. And I started from there.
And when you started, what were some of those initial steps?
First step was I acknowledged that I was screwed up.
Okay.
I had to acknowledge that. Then I had to acknowledge that I had to open up my bills because I was in debt.
Okay.
And they were piled up. I had to open it up and look at my debt.
Okay.
I had to acknowledge the fact that I had some issues with myself. I had some baggage that I was holding on to that I needed to start talking about, either journal it or do something about it. They were holding me back and they were causing me to sabotage my life with relationships, mentally and sexually, all kinds of different things. So I had to really do some hard acknowledgement. And the list became long of what I needed to acknowledge. Was I judgmental? Mm-hmm. Yes, I was judgmental about other people. Was I trying to hide things? Yes, I was trying to hide things. So be truthful with myself. So that was the very, very first thing I did.
Where did you go to obtain the support to be able to begin to have those conversations with yourself?
Well, honestly, I didn't have any money. So okay. It was hard for me. I knew that I had to really do a lot of it myself. At that time, there was the internet. So I did do some internet search, but I also found out that I could go to the library. Okay. And there were people that coach you for free.
Wow.
And I went a few times and I met with somebody. They're mentors, basically, and they actually offer up some good therapy. And they gave me some good plans and some good thoughts and some good ideas. But I'm also very big on reading books on positivity and reading books on do-it-yourself books. And because I was such a private person, there was a lot of people I wasn't ready for them to know what I was going through. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to reach out to my best friends and tell them, like, I'm really screwed up, guys, even though I should have.
That's a huge juxtaposition to where you are today, because, even your friends, I imagine some of them know about the book. Maybe they have been your beta readers.
Right.
But for the most part, individuals are going to learn, people that you are close to are going to learn a lot about you.
Exactly. And that's why that vulnerability in writing a book. I mean, I have clients because I'm still a real estate agent and a realtor, obviously. And I have good friends that don't know all of the story. They may know pieces here and there or parts of it, but in some ways they're going to be like surprised because everybody's always thought that Patricia Love lived a very charmed life.
Right.
And they always felt that like I had everything. And and it's just because I wore the lipstick. I covered it up every morning. I would put my smile on and just go out and do what I needed to do to get by. And it worked well for me, but on the outside, but didn't work well for me on the inside.
There's another song there about the clown.
Right?
I'm going to find those two songs. Okay. So it's the growing up with the dad, Cats in the Cradle, and the tears of a clown or something like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this book, Patricia, because we're alluding to a lot of it.
Right.
The vulnerabilities that it took to craft it, and the emotions. I can only imagine. Talk a little bit about the construction of the book. If you could, also, who are your ideal readers?
Okay.
And what do you want them to take away from this book?
Well, great questions. But the people that I want to read the book, and let me just start the construction of it. When I started writing it came out as a lot of little stories because I needed to push through some of these stories of my life that I've been holding in my life for so long. But I also knew that my stories could be very similar to other people's stories with just different names and places. So I felt it was important to tell my story or my memoir so I could get it out. And so it was cathartic, for me, so that I could release. But I also wanted other people, especially women and men also, but especially women, to realize that you're not alone out there. And a lot of people have grown up abandoned, whether they could be fostered or they could be just an abandonment situation, or that they were always felt like an outsider. And I think they can relate to the stories, yet I also wanted to bring in some reflection on each story. So I tried to kind of talk about, like, maybe you thought of this, or maybe you've been in this type of situation. So I've tried to bring it in rather than just being a self-help book, if you know what I mean. Sure. I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be more personal type of thing. So I think that my main person that would love to read this is somebody that's a woman that's has that inner child in her, that maybe she has been held back because her voice was not heard, or she wasn't strong enough, or didn't have the power within to step up, because a lot of women are pushed down. And I know today we're really working on it to get through it and have our voices heard. But there's a lot of people that their inner child has not been talked to, because it's that inner child that it's usually when you're young and something's happened in your 5, 6, 7, or 16, 17, 18, those years that when you're developing, those are the things that stick with you and that affect your life, your adulthood, and you wonder why this is happening. And if you can take the time to think back of that story, of your own little girl, of that your own story, and others out there that have come up and they're lonely and they've had these issues. So I think it's just women that really are looking to have more power from their voice and to be heard, not to go out and not walk down the streets, that kind of power. This is power from within, to you feel comfortable and confident and can feel empowered to stand in a room on your own.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very
so
good.
That's the person that I think we want to read. What was the other question? I forgot the other question.
No, I think oh God, now I have to go back and listen to this. No, I think we talked about the structure of the book. Who's your ideal reader?
Right.
I know in the book there's some, you're creating context. You have an introduction,
right.
Talk about, the behaviors and the habits. And I know you're going to talk about the words, these 5 words: acknowledgement, forgiveness.
Right. These are the words that I live by daily.
Okay.
And because one of the things that I have learned throughout all of this, that I want to live life and not let life live me.
You know what would be really cool? God, I haven't used that word in a long time. This would be cool.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, it's cool. You know what I would love, if you're up for this, Patricia, is the content of this book, the context. I mean, we are still struggling today. I mean, you only have to go on social media, Facebook, Twitter. You see the stuff that's going on in Washington. And women, minorities, women who are minorities, mm-hmm. are still facing the struggles of, just.
We're trying to push through that glass ceiling in all different ways.
Yeah. And you have to compromise, move, get beyond this. And it's just like, which means what you're feeling really doesn't matter, but in reality, it does still matter. And what I think would be kind of nice is if we could, and if you're up for this, coming back on the podcast, and let's break down. First, I think the behaviors are important to understand what those are, because if we can recognize that they are happening or have happened, and we can start to question and take steps, kind of like you did. But also, if you could maybe come back and let's talk about those words.
Well, I'd be honored. I mean, I would be honored to come back and talk about that. Whatever I can do to help and support women that are maybe feeling less than, or less worthy, or not enough because of what society has placed them in, and to let them know that no matter what age you are, you still carry that little girl within you. And we just need to talk to that little girl and say, it's okay. You're okay, little girl. You're going to be all right. And it's amazing. You can move people forward. And whether you're 20, 40, 60, or 80, you can still, whatever time left we have, you want to live the best life you possibly can.
Fantastic.
You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so why not live, even if it's one day left, let's live that one day as good as you can get.
Live your life to the fullest for that one day. I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's have some discussion about it. We'll plan a series of episodes and we'll get you back on to talk about these words and what they mean. You're in.
I'm in.
I love it. I love it. In the meantime, then, just for today's podcast, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, and also how can they become more aware of when the book Seen and Unheard is going to be officially published? I think it's going to be probably another month, but how can they just kind of get on the mailing list? So if you could share, how to get a hold of you and the
Yes.
social sites
Well, a couple of things. You can, the easiest thing is to go to patricialove.com. That's the easiest way. And then there'll be either a pop-up there that you can just get on the list that you can sign up to get notified for the book. I also have a special link that's patricialove.com/new-book/ that will hopefully maybe you could put that in the notes,
Sure.
Howard, for me. And if they want to just get notified about it, my publisher has indicated that we should probably be beginning of March. So that's what we're shooting for. So less than 30 days probably. And I'm excited because I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to it. Now, you are also very active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And
yes, I am. And and as far as Instagram, you can find me at Coach Patricia Love. Pretty easy. And they call me the Rah Rah Coach. So on Facebook, I'm Patricia Love, the Rah Rah Coach. Okay. So it's pretty easy to find me on both those places. Very
good. We'll definitely provide backlinks to the website and to the social sites, and also make sure people can get on the notification for the book as well. Patricia, it was so great to reconnect with you, catch up in 2021. I'm very excited for this catch up and to learn about, since we first had our chat last year, the progress you've made in this birthing of the book, Seen and Unheard.
I know that's it. Birthing in the book and the birthing of me in some ways, another release. But thanks, Howard, for having me. I love the opportunity, and I'm really excited about coming back and helping other women and men to be the best they possibly can be.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. All right, folks, we've just been chatting with Patricia Love, the Rah Rah Coach. Now, Patricia is a women's empowerment coach, to make that official. She's a practitioner of neurolinguistic programming and the emotional freedom technique. And she's the author of the soon-to-be-published book, Seen and Unheard, A Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. I know for a fact, because I have read the book, and just the passion that Patricia has for this topic. And, it's not just her journey, while that is important, but it's a stepping stone for other women and perhaps men who have had the impact of looking back and really when they were being held back, and the steps that you can take to, as Patricia shares in her 5 words, to really, acknowledge where you've been, but also to begin to take ownership and with choice about where you want to go, both in your personal life and perhaps even in your professional life as well. So we do hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Go out and visit Patricia at patricialove.com. And again, we'll provide those backlinks as well as links to her social site. You can find us on the successinsightpodcast.com webpage. Leave a comment about today's podcast or any other podcast that you're listening to. And we are also on Facebook and on LinkedIn at successinsightpodcast.com. And you can also listen to our episodes on the major podcast platforms: Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, and also on YouTube as well. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Wear your mask, practice social distancing, take care of yourselves and your family, and we will see you on the next episode of the Success Insight podcast. And we're also going to see you again when we bring Patricia back for some additional episodes to talk more in depth about the key points and takeaways from her book, Seen and Unheard. Okay, folks, go out there, take care. We'll see you next time. Bye now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.